A deal signed in silence can still shake the earth. In the heart of West Africa, a decision has been taken that may redraw the lines of power and sovereignty. Burkina Faso, long scarred by terrorism, coups, and fractured politics, has chosen a new road, not charity, not aid, but a partnership forged in steel and fire. And at the center of it stands one man, Ibrahim Traoré. When Traoré seized the reins of leadership, he inherited a nation struggling to breathe under the weight of insecurity. Old rifles against modern insurgents, tired troops against well-armed militias. The soil cried out for renewal, for tools worthy of its defenders. The answer came from an unexpected direction: Pakistan, a land thousands of miles away, yet one with the scars and the strength that Burkina Faso recognized. This is more than a contract for jets, tanks, and drones. It is a statement, a pledge that the Burkinabe will not bow, will not wait for foreign pity. They will build, with their own hands and chosen allies, a shield of sovereignty. Stay with us. This is not just a headline. It is a turning point. Subscribe now and walk with us through this story of power, dignity, and defiance. For the weapons chosen were not ordinary. They were machines that carried both fear and hope. Burkina Faso is a landlocked nation, a country of proud farmers and soldiers, yet one that has carried the wounds of relentless conflict. For years, terrorist groups carved scars into its soil, turning villages into battlefields and markets into zones of fear. The state, fragile and fragmented, struggled to defend its people. Insurgents arrived with modern rifles and explosive devices, while Burkinabe soldiers often held weapons older than themselves. The imbalance was cruel, and each defeat deepened the nation's vulnerability. When Ibrahim Traoré assumed leadership, he inherited more than a chair of power. He inherited a storm. The mandate was unspoken yet clear: protect the people, or the soil itself would reject its rulers. The young captain understood that security could no longer rest on outdated arsenals. Modern threats demanded modern answers. But from where could Burkina Faso, a nation under sanctions and suspicion, secure such answers? The West, with its lofty promises, had often treated African defense not as partnership, but as dependency. Weapons arrived late, spare parts never arrived at all, and training was tethered to conditions that stripped sovereignty. Traoré wanted none of it. He sought a nation that knew the taste of struggle, a nation that had built strength under siege. His eyes turned eastward, beyond deserts and seas, towards Pakistan. Pakistan, itself forged in wars of survival, had spent decades refining cost-effective yet lethal weapons. It had built fighter jets with Chinese cooperation, tanks designed for unforgiving terrains, and drones that hunted silently in hostile skies. For a country like Burkina Faso, every coin counted, and every weapon had to prove its worth in both performance and price. Pakistan was not just an option, it was the answer. The centerpiece of this historic deal was the JF-17 Thunder. This aircraft, often called the Falcon of the Poor, was no less deadly for its affordability. Sleek and agile, the jet could engage in dogfights, strike ground targets, and patrol borders, all within the same mission. Its radar locked onto enemies far beyond the horizon, while its beyond visual range missiles meant that foes could fall from the sky before they even realized they were hunted. For Burkina Faso, the JF-17 was not merely a machine of war. It was a symbol. It meant that the skies above Ouagadougou and beyond would no longer be ceded to drones of insurgents or surveillance flights of foreign powers. It meant sovereignty, painted in steel wings and thunderous engines. But perhaps the most decisive quality of the JF-17 was its accessibility. Unlike Western jets that demanded billions and endless maintenance contracts, the Thunder was built to be flown, fixed, and fought with by nations without deep treasuries. Its maintenance could be learned quickly, its pilots trained in months, not years. This was crucial for Burkina Faso, where every passing day carried the cost of lives. Traore saw in the Thunder not just an aircraft, but the dawn of an air force worthy of the Burkinabe struggle. He envisioned his soldiers, once forced to fight with outdated rifles, now soaring in the sky, striking from above with precision and dignity. He saw villages where children could sleep without fearing the roar of insurgents' vehicles. He saw a flag defended not only on land, but in the boundless skies. Yet, the captain also knew a harsh truth. Fighter jets, no matter how mighty, could not hold ground alone. Air power could strike, intimidate, and shield, but it could not plant its feet on the soil, nor chase terrorists through deserts and mountains. The Thunder was only the first seed. More was needed to grow the harvest of security. And so, from the skies, Traore's gaze fell to the earth, to the rumbling power of steel beasts that could defend the soil itself. The soil of Burkina Faso has always been a stage of struggle. Deserts, savannas, and rocky terrain where battles are not fought from the sky alone. After choosing the JF-17 to guard the air, Ibrahim Traoré turned his focus downward, to the very earth beneath Burkinabe feet. He knew that to reclaim the land from insurgents, the army needed not only wings of thunder, but also the iron fists of tanks. Enter the Al-Khalid tank, a war machine born from Pakistan's own crucible of survival. Its very name, the Eternal, speaks of resilience. This was no lumbering relic of Cold War arsenals. It was a predator designed for speed, strength, and adaptability. With its 120mm smoothbore gun, the Al-Khalid could tear through enemy armor in a heartbeat. Its fire control system, equipped with thermal imaging, meant that whether in blinding desert sun or foggy midnight, the tank could strike with surgical precision. But raw firepower was not its only strength. The Al-Khalid was built to move. While many imagine tanks as slow, cumbersome beasts, this one could race across sand, climb rocky hills, and maneuver through marshes like a restless stallion. For Burkina Faso, where militants often hide in the most unforgiving terrain, mobility was as vital as firepower. A tank that could not reach the battlefield was no tank at all. Equally vital was protection. Burkinabe soldiers had for too long fought with nothing more than thin steel and their own courage against rocket-propelled grenades and improvised explosives. The Al-Khalid changed that equation. Its advanced composite armor could withstand anti-tank missiles and artillery shells, turning what was once a death sentence into a shield of survival. Inside, soldiers found not just machinery, but a promise that their lives mattered, that their nation would invest in their safety. For Traoré, the decision to include the Al-Khalid in his defense pact was more than military logic. It was political symbolism. In a land where discontent and rebellion often grew from the sense of abandonment, giving soldiers tools worthy of their sacrifice was a statement of dignity. It told the rank and file that they were no longer disposable, no longer expected to fight with obsolete weapons, while enemies advanced with modern technology. The arrival of tanks in Burkina Faso was greeted with awe. In villages and towns, whispers turned into shouts. Stories of the new war machines that would patrol the land. Young men, once hesitant to enlist, now saw a future where they would ride in armor, not fall in trenches. Veterans, who had buried too many comrades, felt for the first time in years that victory was not a dream, but a horizon. Internationally, the move raised eyebrows. Analysts in distant capitals began to ask, why Pakistan? Why now? But inside Burkina Faso, the reaction was one of pride. For too long, the nation had been depicted as weak, dependent, a pawn on the chessboard of others. Now it was choosing for itself, and the choice was steel, fire, and sovereignty, a missing direct statement from Ibrahim Traoré or the Burkinabe Ministry of Defense would have added further weight to this chapter. But even without it, the symbolism was unmistakable. Tanks rolling across Burkinabe soil were not merely weapons, they were declarations. Still, Traoré knew that warfare had entered a new age. To fight in the 21st century was not only to dominate skies or crush through land. Modern enemies hid not only in caves and villages, but in the shadows, across borders, moving silently under the cover of night. To chase them required eyes that never closed, and weapons that struck without risking the lives of soldiers. And so, the captain turned to the future of warfare, machines with no heartbeat, wings without pilots, the silent hunters of the sky. When the deal with Pakistan was announced, it was not only a military pact, it was a shift that rippled into the daily lives of the Burkinabe people, into the fragile fabric of politics, and into the very identity of the nation. For decades, the story of Burkina Faso had been written in the ink of coups, insecurity, and dependency. Now, Ibrahim Traoré sought to rewrite that story in the steel of jets, tanks, and drones. At the heart of this transformation was security. For too long, villagers had lived under the constant shadow of insurgent attacks. Families abandoned farmlands. Traders feared the roads. Children grew up knowing the sound of gunfire better than laughter. The arrival of modern weapons promised not only defense, but dignity. It told farmers that they could till their fields without fear. It told mothers that markets could once again be safe. It told children that their skies were no longer surrendered. This psychological shift was as important as the weapons themselves. A people who believe they are defended are a people who dare to hope, to work, to rebuild. In Burkina Faso, hope had become a scarce commodity. Traoré's pact with Pakistan was not just about military might. It was about planting seeds of confidence in a soil long starved of it. Politically, the effects were immediate. Every coup in Burkina Faso's history had been justified by the failure of leaders to provide security. By moving decisively, Traoré positioned himself as the captain who would not repeat the mistakes of the past. He projected strength not only to his enemies, but also to his own ranks. Soldiers who had once questioned their superiors now saw a leader investing in their survival. Opposition groups, though still critical, could not deny that this was a turning point. The deal also carried economic implications. Modern weapons are costly, and critics worried about the burden on a fragile economy. But supporters argued that insecurity itself was the greatest cost, draining resources, deterring investors, and destroying livelihoods. Stability, they insisted, was the foundation upon which growth could be built. For every dollar spent on defense, they saw a return in markets reopened, trade restored, and confidence regained. Here lies the paradox. In a nation where poverty remains widespread, the purchase of fighter jets and tanks might seem extravagant. Yet, in the calculus of survival, such choices can be the difference between collapse and endurance. Traoré bet on the latter. He gambled that sovereignty secured today would yield prosperity tomorrow. Beyond economics, the pact also reshaped the social fabric. The sight of new machines Thundering jets, roaring tanks, and buzzing drones ignited pride among the youth. Recruitment into the armed forces surged. For young men and women who had long felt their nation was left behind, this was a chance to be part of something bigger, a revolution of dignity and defense. And yet, shadows remained. Critics warned that militarization alone could not heal the wounds of Burkina Faso. Weapons might suppress insurgents, but they could not erase the roots of discontent. Poverty, marginalization, corruption. Without reforms in governance, they cautioned, the weapons could become a temporary plaster over a deeper wound. Still, for Traore, the decision was clear. To govern without security was to build on sand. To restore dignity, he first had to shield life itself. And so, while debates raged, the weapons arrived, and the nation braced for a new chapter. It was in this moment that the story of Burkina Faso became entangled with the story of Ibrahim Traoré himself. His rise to power, his defiance against dependency, his gamble on Pakistan, all became part of a narrative that would be remembered as the Ibrahim Traoré coup, a coup not only of power, but of direction, shifting the nation from waiting on others to choosing its own allies. But even as the Burkinabe took pride, a larger question loomed beyond its borders. Sovereignty won at home would inevitably meet scrutiny abroad, and in the world of geopolitics, every gain carries a price. The question was no longer whether Burkina Faso had found its weapons, but how the world would respond to its revolution of steel and sovereignty. No revolution exists in isolation. The moment Burkina Faso turned to Pakistan, the world began to watch. Some with curiosity, others with concern, and a few with quiet unease. For in the theater of geopolitics, even the decisions of a landlocked West African nation ripple across oceans. Regional bodies like the African Union, AU, and ECOWAS reacted with caution. On paper, both institutions championed the stability of the region, often pressuring governments to avoid actions that might provoke escalation. Yet behind closed doors, officials whispered of a precedent. If Burkina Faso could choose its own partners, what might stop Mali, Niger, or Guinea from doing the same? The deal was not only about weapons, it was about independence from traditional spheres of influence. The European Union and the United States observed the development through a different lens. For them, Pakistan's growing military ties in Africa hinted at deeper alignments. Pakistan, with its strong defense partnership with China, was seen as a conduit for Beijing's influence. Analysts in Washington and Brussels began to frame the deal not merely as a bilateral exchange, but as part of a larger struggle over who shapes Africa's security architecture. Would Burkina Faso's revolution of arms become a symbol of multipolar defiance? Pakistan, on the other hand, emerged as a quiet winner. For decades, it had sought to expand its defense exports beyond Asia and the Middle East, supplying jets, tanks, and drones to a country like Burkina Faso was more than a commercial victory. It was an entry point into Africa's evolving security landscape. Each delivery of weapons carried not just hardware, but influence. Each training mission deepened ties, weaving a fabric of partnership stronger than any contract. Within Burkina Faso, supporters embraced the deal as part of a broader struggle, not only against insurgents, but against the idea that sovereignty must be borrowed from others. They called it the Burkina Faso Revolution, a phrase that captured both pride and defiance. In their eyes, this was not simply about tanks or planes, but about breaking chains of dependency. Yet the international stage is rarely forgiving. Questions of sanctions, diplomatic isolation, or pressure from global powers remain unresolved. History shows that whenever a smaller nation asserts its independence, the guardians of the old order respond. Whether Burkina Faso will withstand that response is a story still unfolding. For even as jets take to the skies and tanks roll across the soil, the greatest battle may not be fought on African ground at all, but in the halls of global power. Every choice in history is both a door and a risk. By signing the deal with Pakistan, Ibrahim Traoré opened a path, but no path is free of shadows. The future of Burkina Faso now rests on how this choice unfolds, whether it becomes a shield of sovereignty or a chain of dependency. The risks are clear. Weapons can defend a nation, but they can also drain it. The cost of jets, tanks, and drones will not vanish after purchase. Maintenance, spare parts, and training require steady resources. If the economy falters or allies withdraw, Burkina Faso may find itself bound by the very machines meant to liberate it. And in the realm of international politics, powerful nations may not watch idly. Sanctions, pressure, or diplomatic isolation could follow, testing the resilience of Traoré's gamble. Yet the opportunities are equally undeniable. For the first time in decades, Burkina Faso has the chance to craft a military that is not a relic, but a force for tomorrow. With modern equipment, insurgents lose their greatest advantage: the ability to outgun and outmaneuver. With stronger borders, trade routes can reopen, investors can return, and farmers can reclaim abandoned fields. Security, once restored, becomes the soil from which prosperity may grow. Beyond weapons, this path symbolizes something larger: the dignity of choice. For generations, African states were told who to depend on, who to fight with, who to bow to. By selecting Pakistan, Burkina Faso has declared that it will no longer be a passive recipient of aid, but an active chooser of partnerships. This message may echo across the continent. If one small landlocked nation can carve its own road, what stops the rest? For the Burkinabe youth, the path ahead is one of pride and responsibility. They see not only tanks and planes, but a call to serve, to defend their soil with tools worthy of their courage. For the elders, the deal is a reminder that their sacrifices were not in vain, that the struggle for sovereignty did not end in the past, but continues into the present. The road is uncertain, but it is chosen. Traoré has wagered the future of his nation on the belief that sovereignty, once armed, can no longer be denied. Whether history remembers this as triumph or tragedy depends not on the weapons themselves, but on the hands that wield them, and the wisdom with which they are guided. And so, as the dust of this deal settles, a larger story remains. A story not of machines, but of destiny, waiting to be written in the skies and soils of Africa. History often turns on choices that seem small in the moment, yet echo for generations. The decision of Ibrahim Traoré to look eastward, to place Burkina Faso's security in the hands of a partnership with Pakistan, will be remembered as one such turning point. From rifles too old to fire to the roar of the JF-17 Thunder, from foot soldiers vulnerable to ambush to the iron wall of the Al-Khalid tank, from blind patrols in the night to the all-seeing eyes of Pakistani drones, Burkina Faso has shifted its story. It is no longer the tale of a nation waiting for rescue. It is the story of a nation choosing its allies, choosing its tools, and above all, choosing sovereignty. The cost will be high and the path uncertain, but dignity has never been cheap, and sovereignty has never been handed as a gift. This was the essence of the Ibrahim Traoré coup. Not simply a seizure of power, but a declaration that Burkina Faso will no longer bow to dependency. This coup was a coup of direction, of choosing a new road when the old one led only to despair. Supporters already call it the Burkina Faso Revolution. Whether it becomes a true revolution will depend on what follows, on how the weapons are used, on whether governance reforms walk hand in hand with military might, on whether the people themselves see not just guns, but a future worth defending. And yet, one truth stands clear. For the first time in years, the Burkinabe can look to the horizon and see not only threats, but possibilities. The soil of their ancestors has not been abandoned. It has been armed. It has been honored. And it waits for the harvest of sovereignty. So, what do you think? Can one small nation's defiance inspire a continent? Can the Ibrahim Traoré coup become more than a moment? Can it become a movement? Share your thoughts below. And if this story of resilience and revolution speaks to you, subscribe now and stand with us for the chapters yet to come.